Welcome to Transformative Principle, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principle. I am very excited to have on the program today Derek Crager. He is a passionate advocate for making artificial intelligence approachable and accessible, particularly for individuals within the neurodiverse community. As someone who is autistic, Derek has dedicated himself to fostering a supportive environment where people with autism, ADHD, and dyslexia can leverage AI to enhance their skills and income. Through his work at Practical AI, he emphasizes clarity and support, ensuring that users can navigate AI without being overwhelmed by its complexities. He's got a great history and this wonderful community at Practical AI that you can read a little bit more about on the show notes at transformativeprinciple.org. But Derek, DC, you prefer DC, so we'll go with DC. Excuse me, I keep saying Derek. Welcome to Transformative Principle.
Well, thank you, Jethro. And honestly, anything is fine. Derek, in a crowded room, people hear Daryl and Eric and anything else. So, but yeah, my name is Derek. DC, either one I respond to. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, great to have you here. Talk to me a little bit about this idea of using AI, particularly with neurodiverse people. What's the difference for someone who's neurodiverse as opposed to just any regular Joe off the street?
Well, I think the experience is different because our histories are different. If we to throw a couple terms out here, neurodiversity on one side and neurotypical on the other. The neurotypical is that category we throw the traditionally average people to, air quotes here, quote unquote average, but normative, I guess, is a better way to put it. Average always sounds like an insult, so when it's applied to humans. But yeah, the experience coming in with AI is that it gives us someone to talk to. And connecting through a human level is important. And I'm even talking beyond, keystrokes and clicks. It's if we can get to that human conversation with AI, and that's one thing I do with my company, both on the profit and the nonprofit side, is I built a voice interface to emulate this patient supportive anthropomorphized AI that sounds like a human. So I think that's important to get through the psychological barrier. But either way, those of us that are on the spectrum or considered neurodivergent, we have honestly a rough history. We are the lowest employment rate when it comes to employment statistics. And a lot of times we do good things, but we can't explain them well. So that means we don't connect to the social. So AI allows us to speak with ourselves in a manner. There's multiple platforms out there, whether it be Notebook LM or ChatGPT Project or Perplexity Spaces. Those are just three off the top of my head that allow us to create a diary for ourselves and be able to talk to ourselves. So in that manner, it's those of us that are ADHD, we're either at 50,000 feet or we're deep in the weeds and nowhere in between. So I know it allows me to, when I'm deep in the weeds, to talk to myself through the AI interface and say, hey, give me a broad view because I'm stuck on something. Or even just the opposite. If I'm at the 50,000 viewpoint and my mind's going everywhere racing and I can't get into the weeds or I can't identify the top 5 or the top 10 or what are the highlights, then I can ask myself through this AI front-end diary, to elicit those items. So it's a way to get advice from ourselves and especially we won't have the fear of asking a human. I mean, in school, what's one of the first things we always hear at the beginning of the year? There are no dumb questions type of things. But even still, those of us that are on the spectrum of some sort, we've heard that, and we still get experience that our questions are dumb. So we refrain even deeper and go in our shell.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And in working with my own daughter on this kind of stuff, she sometimes doesn't have the capacity to articulate the question that she's asking. And so, for example, this morning at breakfast, she was she was asking a question, and we couldn't understand what she was asking, and she was trying to refer to something in the past, and instead of saying last Christmas, she said last week. And so then we were more confused about that situation. And there's this paper that came out recently called Your Brain on ChatGPT: Cognitive Debt. And this idea of cognitive debt has really been weighing heavily on me, in that the paper proposed that essentially people who use ChatGPT to do things, that they are taking on cognitive debt. But in reading that paper and starting to understand some aspects of it, I believe that ChatGPT actually provides cognitive equity for some people, because it gives them an ability to do the things that typically get in trouble, cause them trouble in their day-to-day communication. So, for example, for my daughter to put together complex words and phrases can be very challenging, but she can get the base idea down. And so using ChatGPT actually enables her to have a voice where she didn't have a voice before, because it helps her explain things where she's just getting the highlights, and it helps explain them and fill in the gaps. Does that make sense? What do you see with that kind of an approach?
Oh, that's we're definitely in alignment on this. It's what is there? Depending on the research, there's 30,000 or 60,000 words in the English language, and a typical human, we're walking around with five, maybe 6,000 words. So your word for something may be different than my word for something, and we write this off sometimes as cultural. And yeah, the culture has a certain connection to it, and the reason why somebody might call a couch at one place but a Davenport in someplace else. It's if we don't know there's that translation, then yeah, we're like, wait a minute, what is a Davenport? And so yeah, the way your family speaks, it's the same way for your daughter. I picture that, and first of all, I want to preface this by saying that anybody on the neurodiverse spectrum, in that neurodiversity group, just because we have diagnosed with the same professional diagnosis, whatever that might be, that does not mean that we're the same as somebody else sitting next to us with that same diagnosis. And I think that's very important to understand. That's something that I didn't even understand until 10 years ago. And so there's something that Dr. Nancy Doyle came up with. She's a doctor out of the UK, and she built this community called Genius Within, and she talks about what is neurodiversity, and she identifies the spiky profile. And to her, the spiky profile is that it's like an XY graph, and we plot out our skill sets. And the neurotypical people in the world, they're like a +1 to a -1 or a 0 all the way across, but they come out to be that average. There's that word again, average, but that's normal. And so for the those of us that are neurodiverse, we might be a 10, where neurotypicals are a 1, but to balance that, we might be a -10, where a neurotypical is a 1, and that +10 might be in our creativity. It could be building something. It could be our analytical mind. And then maybe we come up with something great for a company or a school or a project or for mom and dad. And then we try to explain it. And so, like your daughter is trying to explain, maybe we're a -10. And because we lack the control over the words. And to some of that, it really, that lack of control over the words is the interface with the rest of humanity or humankind. And if that's our only method of communication, then it sounds like whoever's trying to communicate is ignorant or they lack the knowledge, where sometimes it's just the opposite. Sometimes there are so many things going on in that mind that they might know 10 words for that topic, and they're just going to throw one out at you because their gears are turning so fast. They're just spitting to put the language together, and in their mind is running so fast that they're thinking about 10 things ahead of the conversation. So to put them in a scenario where they have to stop, smell the roses type of phrase. There are all kinds of phrasings in life that we pick up. Take a minute, take a heartbeat type of things. Live in the present. For those of us with our minds where the gears are going, it's very easy to use words that our conversation partners don't understand. So it is very much like a interpretation needed, and ChatGPT does offer that definitely.
Well, yeah, and that's something that's really interesting. I like that genius within approach, because in my daughter's situation, she may be a -10 in a whole bunch of areas and then a +10 in only one area. And, when we talk about this, we often talk like we're really good in one area that makes up for the deficit in another area. But it may be that we're negative in a lot of areas as it relates to what is typical and what is normal. And that makes it really difficult to assimilate and participate in our modern economy and the things that we do on a day-to-day basis in our society. That can make it really challenging. And one of those things is being able to read, for example. Even with all this stuff around AI, so much of it is text-based. And so you mentioned having a voice interface that helps. And then you also mentioned the idea of this patient, infinitely patient thing that can deal with the millions of questions that are asked. And that is exactly something that I've seen with neurodiverse folks that I've worked with, that they have a lot of questions and ask them repeatedly and constantly, even when we already have determined that these things are the case and happening. They still come back to these questions often. And so having something that is infinitely patient can be a really powerful support for someone. And so my question then, with these contexts in place, how do you do it so that the AI is actually beneficial for the person, and that it is attuned to what it is that they need, and that it can help them in their specific use case?
Oh, certainly. It's that's an important distinction because we hear and we read of the headlines that talk about AI being inaccurate or hallucinating, etc. So we have our special sauce on the back end of our model, and our model is set up where we take the knowledge domain, whatever that knowledge domain is. So we compartmentalize a specific knowledge. For example, let's say 7th grade science. Maybe we take the 7th grade science book and we digest that into a database. Vector database is a cool term to throw around. But we digest that into a database. We have an AI on the back end that interprets the data, and then we have that transition point. We have a different large language model on the front end to interface between the human and the back end. And so it's really about putting the knowledge in a container and allowing our AI to speak to and from that knowledge domain, nowhere else. So we put guardrails on it. And so the conversation, when we're talking to it, is very much like speaking to somebody that is on the spectrum, because we set this up as a subject matter expert, this SME in a box, and it talks ad infinitum on that subject. But if you ask it about, curly fries at Arby's, it's probably not going to be the answer yet. And it versus the public domain tools that are out there, you're just going to get the first answer that comes up. That's really ChatGPT's model, is to just return an answer. So yeah, that's it's important that we stick to the quality of the data, and we increase the accuracy of the conversation by limiting our interface with just that specific data.
So, how does this work then in a situation where there is, let's say we need this to be a helper for navigating the community, for example, and someone doesn't have the language skills to get out there, but they can text, and then can the AI then be their voice and say, I want to go to this place, and it will communicate that for them? What kinds of situations where exist where you can do more than just teach a subject, but can also help them navigate an environment or a conversation or a relationship?
Yeah, well, that's ideal, and that's really our forte. That's where we thrive is going beyond just the steps, because we can have a list of ingredients on a recipe and it tells us how to bake muffins, but that doesn't mean that the index card can tell us what to do if our oven is oversized or it's out of whack or we're missing an ingredient. And then in the how about this? If we have our earbuds in and we're listening to our map, let's say Google Map that's walking around town, so that would be similar to the scenario you're talking about, in a geographical sense. The Google Maps is going to respond on just straight how to get there, but you can't ask Google Maps, um, the road's blocked or the bridge is washed out. I mean, they've got some workarounds in there, but it's not conversational. Whereas if your daughter was speaking to you over the telephone, she has her backpack on, her earbuds in, and she's talking to dad, and she says, "Hey, Dad, I got down here and I can see the McDonald's across the way, but the bridge is washed out." Then Dad would say, "Oh, yeah, 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 just go down to First Street, take a right, and that's the workaround." And that's a very simplified version of what our AI is doing right now conversationally. So any place that a human can be and offer mentorship, that is that's the domain we're covering right now. We're not trying to be all things to all people, but in that scenario, we take the topic and we are working on business side, we have school side on specific topics, but also I learned when I'm not a certified teacher, I'll say that to the crowd here, but I know that there's a shortage of teachers. So in what time I have to spare, I volunteer at the local as a substitute teacher, and I found out that depending on the school system, you have adults that chaperone or mentor in individual students one-on-one throughout the day. They walk around with them, they go with them, they help interpret, like we discussed a little bit ago, and they help interface and they help that day go better for that student. So everybody can learn in the school system without disrupting the class. So that's a lot of money. If we had one adult for every student, I mean, we wouldn't have 25 to 1 teacher to student ratios, right? So if we had that economic capability, we'd be supporting the teachers much better. So with this, and I saw this a couple years ago, and it started my mind turning on this. In your scenario, can we give somebody this virtual mentor that they can carry around with them, and it's not even a visual handicap at this point, so it doesn't separate them and call them out for being different. Oh, you got the human walking with you. It's in their ear, and they can say, "Hey, I'm going to math class, and I really have trouble with math, and I don't know where to start, and I don't know how to talk to the teacher about it. Can you talk me through this?" And in a very supporting, caring way, it will say, "Hey, try this." And then depending on the knowledge that is contained, there's different scenarios that it will walk the student through on how to connect. We could have that knowledge programmed with, what's my locker combination? I forgot. And then I was listening to your episode last week with you and Damon talking about software, and I think it was Damon that was going into. We have this knowledge loss when a teacher leaves, and the teacher takes all that knowledge of the student, and then we have a certain amount of records, but those records are really cold, and they really don't tell us about the student other than really their attendance and a very high level view. And I know a large part of your discussion was on, well, do we share a spreadsheet, and what happens when we fat finger the spreadsheet, and who has access to this knowledge, and so I envision taking the tool that we built and going beyond just supporting one person at a time, but in a scenario where we're not, where the privacy concerns are taken care of and it's all within the school system. How cool would it be for little Johnny or Jill to come into a class in second term, and the teacher doesn't pull up a record and look at this, black and white ones and zeros about the record, but what if they could just dial a phone number and said, hey, I've got Johnny and his twin sister Jill in here, in from the next borough over. Can you tell me about them? And then conversationally, uh, they're going to be told about the highs, the lows, what they're having trouble with, what they really excel at. And I tell people, Jethro, that our AI technology is 50,000 years old, because back in the day, before Gutenberg press and before writing instruments, we told stories, and it was human to human. That's how we learned. So we're going back to the basics, the true basics of having that conversation, and we're scaling it, and we're giving the user this one-on-one time with this dynamic knowledge base that they can use when it suits them. They don't have to set an appointment, they don't have to call in at a certain time, but all that information is there when they need it.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about, DC, because that's exactly where I want to get to, where the support is there, but the human still remains in the conversation. Now, you talked about going into the math class and saying, I really don't get this. And one of the real problems we have with students is that they don't articulate that. They act out with poor behavior. And that's typically how we find out that kids are struggling in school, is that they have poor behavior to start. Now, if someone cannot articulate that they're struggling with math, this is an area where maybe that phone call the teacher makes can help communicate that, maybe not. But if there's a way for them to be able to get the help that they need without acting out behaviorally, then that would be ideal, because that then lets everybody focus on learning and not focus on dealing with these negative behaviors that crop up when kids are doing things that to get out of the work or to avoid the difficult work. And this is a really important thing to all teachers and school leaders, because that's usually what happens, is that it becomes a behavior issue, especially if the kid can't communicate effectively what's really going on. And this is a huge problem in education, that if we can find the solution to it, it'll be a lifesaver for everybody, the kids, the adults, everybody involved in the process.
Agreed 100%. Teachers, gosh, put in 12-hour days for a 7-hour class day, and they're doing work before, during, and after. And you would think it translates into one-on-one time with a student, but I think on one of your episodes, saying I think Alaska has like 5 different state tests, and they're all on different platforms. So so much time we teach to the test, just out of we're kind of our hand is forced, that we don't have time to actually teach. So yeah, absolutely, is with a conversational tone. We can iterate back and forth through conversation much quicker than an email or records, or maybe I make a phone call and are these records correct, or do you have more records about this student? And there's students with parents, there's students without parents, there's students that have helicopter parents, there's those students with parents that work all the time. So we have no idea what the student support system is back home. And absolutely, if we need to work and offer every possible avenue of communication, because those sometimes we just need to be heard. And I point to Maslow's hierarchy. We have certain needs that need to be met before we can even exist, and I believe that being heard is a very strong need in human civilization as an individual. And if we're just heard, that dispels and deflates and depressurizes a lot of those volatile situations.
It definitely does, and people need to be heard no matter what. And a lot of times, kids in schools seek to be heard by their behavior when the other things they're trying to do aren't working, or they don't have the capacity to do that. So, this has been a great conversation. How can people get connected with you and with what you're doing with Practical AI?
Oh, certainly. So I have a nonprofit side. It's called AI for Autistics, all spelled out. AIForAutistics.com, that tells about a community that we build. Autistics have the lowest employment rate we may have touched on earlier. So we guide and we teach on how to use AI to build software. And I know that came up in your conversation last week too. And I think you said you use Replit to build, but there's several other ones out there. So this is a great tool for those analytically minded, which a lot of us fall into. So we teach them how to build things, and that's a no cost. It just is there. On the for-profit side, the bigger realm, practical AI app. So just like it sounds phonetically, practicalai.app, Apple pair. And if you find my name on LinkedIn, please reach out, say hello, and I'd love to connect and help everyone in your audience.
Yeah, very good. Well, this has been awesome, and I know we just barely scratched the surface. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And please, everybody, go check out practicalai.app or AIForAutistics.com. Thanks again so much, DC, for being part of Transformative Principal.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here. Have a great day.